What's up, everybody? This is DJ Cade, back once again like a Renegade Master, and as you can tell from my channel, I haven't had some uploads in quite a while. I've actually been on a fishing trip up to Canada, which was a very, very refreshing trip for me. I managed to catch a walleye, a couple of lake trout, and 3 northern pikes. It was an amazing trip. I had an absolute blast, but unfortunately the entire time I was there I didn't have any Wi-Fi, I didn't have access to my computer, I didn't have access to 4G, not even a cell phone signal. So while I was on vacation, I had the chance to really contemplate a lot of video ideas. And now that I'm able to get connected to the internet again and I'm able to upload videos once again and record videos, I want to bring to you a video today that I think is going to really make you think about the current state of the Pokemon Go scene and maybe inspire you guys to maybe get more inspiration and ideas and various features and things we could get added into the game, things that we could request that would make PvP a much better game for everybody, whether you're an older player or a newer player. Because one of the sentiments that I've seen suggested time and time again ever since PvP came out, whether it's on Reddit or it's from other YouTubers or whether it's from people in the comments section, is the idea that we want to take this game and try to make it as big as possible. What if we could make Pokemon Go into an eSport? And everything in this video that I'm going to be talking about today is going to be on that topic. It's going to be all on the topic of whether this game can become an eSport, how big could it be, what's holding it back, what kind of things does it need to change in order to be that big competitive eSport that we're all sort of secretly hoping will happen. I mean, there's been a lot of effort put into the PvP scene from the people at Sylph Road and all of the people who have been competing and uploading theory videos and websites and calculators and battle simulators, and the list goes on and on and on. It's just been a monumental undertaking by the community. And everything I talk about today is going to be from the perspective of not only trying to get this game to a point where it can be a big competitive esport, but one that can be seen in tournaments, like the stadiums and big arenas, big venues with like anywhere from like 500 people to tens of thousands of people watching these competitive matches. Something that you would eventually see on something like ESPN or some kind of other gaming network, big Twitch streams, front page. We're talking, you know, Evo and other tournament coverage. Everything I'm saying in this video, keep this in mind today, that is all going to be in the context of getting Pokemon Go PvP to that point. Now, guys, this is going to be a little bit of a long video, and I'm just going to put that out there right away. I mean, I'm going to fill this with as much content and as much information and as many different points as I possibly can, because I really think a lot of these things need to be considered. I really think that some things need to be fought for in the community. And overall, I just have a whole lot of topics I want to cover in this video. So with that intro out of the way, I'm just going to get right into the video, and I'm going to get into my very first topic. So when I ask myself the question of whether or not this game even has the potential to be an esport, because I've seen a lot of comments on Reddit, you know, that are kind of, that early on in the day that were kind of joking about like, oh, it's a tournament to see who can tap the fastest. That's all it is, right? Well, I think the community has pretty much overwhelmingly proven at this point that there are multiple layers of strategy to this, and there is a clear difference between the top players and the bottom and the players who aren't so great. So the thing is, what I thought I would do is, I thought, well, since the two games, since Pokemon Go and the Pokemon Game Boy games are so similar in their mechanics, I figured one of the first things I could do is look up a list of all the current esports games, or the games that are at least considered an esport, and see if the existing Pokemon Go Game Boy games are amongst them. So I don't know how this is going to show up on your screen, if this is going to be big enough or clear enough to read, but here we have the list of all the esports games from Wikipedia. And obviously at the top you've got fighting games, you got Street Fighter, Smash Brothers, Marvel vs. Capcom, Tekken, Killer Instinct. You've got a whole list of first-person shooters, probably my favorite of which is going to be Quake 3, but it's not listed here. But there's all kinds of different first-person shooter games, obviously. Then you have the real-time strategy games, StarCraft, Warcraft, real sports titles like the FIFA series and Madden and all of that, racing games, multiplayer MOBAs, basically, League of Legends, Smite, Dota 2, and all of those other things. And as we go down further, we have Gears of War, which is kind of like a hybrid. That could have been a first-person shooter, but it's not really. It's not first-person. We've got other types of competitive games, and look here. We have Pokemon as a competitive esport. So, I mean, if this is going to be, if this is already considered an esport, then I would say that Pokemon Go also has a very good chance of being an esport as well. And while this may not be as supported of an esport from big organizations like MLG or Evo or whatever, you know, even if it's only supported by Nintendo and the Pokemon Company, then it's still qualifying as an esport in the technical dictionary definition sense. Keep in mind that, you know, it has the unique advantage of having a typing system that has basically persisted through the entire series, and it's very, very familiar to people. The second question I wanted to ask myself about whether or not this could be an esport is its accessibility. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about accessibility in the competitive game scene, because there's one particular YouTuber who I'm somewhat of a fan of, and his name's MatPat, and he has a video that he made that was all about accessibility in esports and trying to bring in more people into the competitive scene, and as a result find those few players that really catch on fast, are real prodigies of it, and as a result create more competition and more diversity and more excitement within the scene. So if you want to check out his comments and if you want to see what he has to say about accessibility in esports, definitely check out the video. I'm not going to show anything from it because I don't want to be, you know, cutting in on anybody's territory or anything, but he's got a lot of great things to say. Now, if we examine Pokemon Go PvP under a microscope of, is it an accessible game? Just from the angle of, is this game accessible? Well, I would be willing to argue that absolutely yes, this game is incredibly accessible. How many people do you know that have a cell phone? Probably a lot. Almost everybody has a cell phone in this day and age, and most people have a cell phone that can play Pokemon Go. Another thing about it is it's a free game on top of that. You technically don't need to pay any money to play it. So, I mean, you can, obviously, to get more benefits out of it. But because you don't have to pay for the game, that dramatically lowers the barrier to entry for most people. Whereas other esports games might require you to have a really powerful PC or to have like a piece of console hardware that you don't own or anything. I mean, this doesn't even require an extra investment in most people's lives. If anybody has a cell phone, they can immediately pick up the game and start playing it. So I think in those two cases, Pokemon Go comes through in spades in terms of accessibility. I mean, it's blowing a lot of the other games on our list of esports games completely out of the water. So I see no reason why there should be any real accessibility issues with Pokemon Go at this point. I think we can leave that one at the door. This is definitely a huge, 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 huge point in Pokemon Go's favor. The other thing I'd like to do at this point is sort of unfairly maybe compare Pokemon Go PvP to the Pokemon Game Boy game tournament scene. Now, if you watch any Pokemon Game Boy tournaments and everything, if you've ever played it, if you know anything about it, if you've ever done a trainer battle in a game, what am I talking about? I mean, if you haven't done one at this point, like, I don't know how you even made it to this video, but The thing is, with Pokemon in the Game Boy games, the battles are always usually a lot slower and a lot more methodical. You know, both competitors wait their turn and they both pick their attacks for their turn, and the whole strategy of the game comes from guessing what those attacks are going to be. What attacks do they even have on those Pokemon? Whether or not it's the right timing for your attacks, whether or not they have something that can counter or nullify or increase the weather or put something to sleep or lay spikes or clear spikes or anything. There's so many layers of strategy at this point that that's what really makes Pokemon interesting as far as the Game Boy games are concerned from a competitive level. But Pokemon Go PvP, on the other hand, while being very similar in a lot of ways, is vastly different in terms of gameplay. And I think when it comes to accessibility from an audience's perspective, as far as getting into Pokemon Go PvP as a spectator sport, I think Pokemon Go has the potential to be way better than the Game Boy games. Because in the Game Boy games, like I said, there's a lot of time where you're just sitting there waiting for the opponents to select their attacks, and the Pokemon are just basically sitting there doing their idle animations. But in Pokemon Go PvP, you know that that's not like that. These battles are very quick, they're extremely fast, and the opponent is attacking you constantly, right? I mean, you're going to get hit. You're going to keep taking hits, and you have to make decisions that will affect the rest of the battle for the rest of the match, you know, in that moment. And you have to have quick wit, and you have to have very, very fast decision making in the moment. And battles in Pokemon Go PvP really aren't going to last long. I mean, unless you've got two teams that each have all three Pokemon that are just extremely tanky for some reason, you know, you're not going to end up with matches that are extremely slow. Most of these matches are going to be over in less than 2 minutes. You know, I think it's rare, actually, for a match to go more than 2 minutes. So when you're talking about audience engagement and you're talking about, you know, competitive battles and all of that, and the fact that, you know, there's usually either a 2 out of 3 or in some cases a 3 out of 5 situation, those are very, very easy things for the audience to digest and understand and really wrap their head around, and it makes it a lot easier and a lot more interesting for the general public to consume these battles in a lot shorter time frame. Like, you know, I'm just going to go from my own perspective here and just kind of like go off the cuff with one of my own opinions about something slightly related. I like car racing, all right? I've always been a fan of old cars and muscle cars and all of those kind of things and classic cars. And I've always liked various kinds of racing. Rally racing is awesome. I love drifting, but I can tell you, I just have no patience for NASCAR. I mean, it's not even the associations that go with it. It's just purely from a technical standpoint. Like, it's just boring to me. It's just so boring to just have to sit there for 2 hours and watch the same thing. And, you know, that's why I prefer to watch drag racing a whole lot more, because those races, they're over in 10 seconds or less. You know, so, you know, it's easy to watch, it's easy to digest and consume for the masses. And even though that like time difference and how long one race takes versus the other, even though that's a very extreme time difference in that case, and maybe it's not that extreme between Go PvP and the Game Boy games, you know, that's kind of a similar point, you know, as far as the whole ability to reach a wider audience is concerned. And another thing I want to talk about is if we are talking about competitive esports in terms of things that are actually going to make it onto the television and onto big streaming networks and the like, is I'm going to make kind of another unfair comparison here, if that's okay. What I want to do is I want to compare Pokemon Go PvP to Texas Hold'em poker. because I really think there are a lot of similarities between these two games that a lot of people don't consider. In Texas Hold'em Poker, the first 3 cards are laid down. That's what's called the flop. And the whole strategy of Texas Hold'em Poker is to sort of like look at the cards that are on the table and sort of consider, what could the opponent have? What sort of plays could they make against me? What are they possibly holding? And while most of poker is based on bluffing and keeping your cool and keeping a straight face, Pokemon Go has some similarities, but it also has a lot of differences from that. I think in the sense that you have a certain sort of layout. You think of your Pokemon as your cards, right? You get to look at your opponent's hands, so to speak. But it goes deeper than that, because you have to consider which cards they're going to play, which 3 cards they're going to play out of their hand of 6, right? And then you'd also have to consider which moves are those cards going to have, because they could have different move sets. They could have different strategies on these cards that you wouldn't expect. So there's a lot of guessing games, there's a lot of strategy involved in that, and I think there's actually more data points and more flaws, if that makes any sense, in Pokemon Go, to where people can formulate strategies better, instead of it just being a pure guessing game, which is what poker can become. Because not only that, not only do you have the 3 cards in your deck, but you also have which one could be the lead as well. So there's also that additional factor. You know, there's also the additional factor of, like, out of those 3 cards, which ones are they going to devote all their shields to? There's so many different factors, and there's different concrete, like, data points. Like, I don't really have a various word for it, but there's more ways where people can find subtle flaws and advantages and disadvantages and make better strategies. And I think that makes it a whole lot more interesting and, you know, in that sense, comparable to Texas Hold'em Poker. Oh, and by the way, if we're talking about the physical activity of something that's going to be on something like ESPN, then let's face it, Pokemon Go has physical activity over Texas Hold'em Poker in spades. Once again, I mean, think of all the physical effort that you have to do, if you're not a spoofer, in order to be able to grind and find the right Pokemon and gather the Stardust and create these teams and engage in trades with your community in order to get the Pokemon that you want or the better IVs you want. I'd say that Pokemon Go is way more engaging. And on top of that, something else that just popped into my mind just now that I wasn't even thinking of is Pokemon Go has the unique ability to tap into people's personal stories. You guys probably have heard of a show called American Ninja Warrior. Everybody competes on this show in order to conquer, you know, basically what used to be called Mount Midoriyama. Now I think it's just the course, I'm not sure. But not only are people trying to conquer the course, but they also have great personal stories. Some of them have incredibly inspiring stories of personal triumph and hard work and determination, where they've overcome a mental illness, or they've lost a lot of weight, or they've improved their health, or somebody said that they had a physical disability or something like that. Somebody told them that, and they went out and proved them wrong, and they went out and showed them that they could do something great. And Pokemon Go has stories like that. There are people whose health has greatly improved because of all the extra physical activity. There's people who have had their social lives vastly improved and have made dozens of friends as the result of getting out and networking with people face to face. So if you want to talk about personable stories, like compared to Texas Hold'em Poker, once again, like Hold'em Poker has nothing on that. Nothing. So if you want to talk about another huge point in favor of Pokemon Go PvP being a somewhat of a easily consumable, like relatable eSport for the public, again, Pokemon Go has that in spades. So I really, for those few reasons that I've just listed there, I really see no reason why there should be any negativity about this being a competitive esport. But those are just the points I wanted to cover in terms of its potential to be a greater esport, in order to be seen in the public as a greater esport. I'm just talking purely in terms of the game's potential, not in terms of the things we may need to change or the things we may need to fix. Now, I initially had a completely different intro planned for this video because there was one particular thing that's kind of been floating around in the ether of my brain, and just something that I needed to put out if I was creating all of these ideas for how this could be an esport. And there was just one particular topic that was just nagging on me, and I knew that if this was going to be left unchecked, then it could possibly pose a bigger problem for this game in the future. And when I first recorded some of the intro parts of this video, I was being a little bit more dramatic and a little bit more negative, and I was going to maybe try to draw some more attention with a little bit more of a clickbaity title. But I decided to reel in from that. I decided to get a grip and present this in a much more positive way. However, I did record a pretty good rant about the exact topic that I wanted to talk about. And if you saw the thumbnail, then you probably got a hint as to what that might be. But I thought it was a pretty good rant, and I wanted to preserve it, and I really didn't get too negative about it, I don't think. So, and maybe I kind of went a little bit, you know, too far in terms of like how bad this problem really is in PvP, but I really think that like I can't capture the energy and I can't say what I want to say unless I preserve this original clip that I recorded from about a week ago before I left on this trip to Canada. So I think what I'll do is I'll just hit you with this idea. I'll play it for you right now. We need the reintroduction of every single legacy move and community day move that has ever existed in this game, period. And I'm going to explain why. Now, I know what you guys are probably saying already. Oh, it's just not possible. Niantic, they'll just never do it. They'll never do something like, well, why are you getting so upset? Well, let me tell you the reason why I think all these legacy moves need to be reintroduced. And I'm going to start with a little story, okay? See, I have been trying to record my videos, and you know, amongst my friends, I've been sharing them amongst my community. I've been sharing them on Facebook. I've been sharing them on Discord channels that, you know, a lot of my friends are a part of. And what's really neat is that they see my passion for the game, and they really want to get involved in it. They really see that the communities are fantastic. They see that people are really friendly. They see a lot of similarities between the Game Boy games and the PvP titles. They see that the battles are fun and quick and need some fast wit and fast decision making in the moment. So I've actually had like dozens of friends get a hold of me and say like, yo, Cade, we'd really like to be a part of this. We'd really like to be more of a part of PvP. But unfortunately, most of the conversations that I have with my friends who want to be involved with PvP end up kind of going something like this. Hey, what's up, Cade? How's it going? Hey, it's going pretty good. I haven't heard from you in a while. Yeah, man, I haven't heard from you in a while either. You spending too much time on YouTube or something? By the way, dude, I saw your videos the other day. I saw your stuff about the tournament coverage. That honestly looks really fun. Yeah, dude, it's a lot of fun. I always have a blast every single time I go. So you gonna come to the next tournament? Oh, heck yeah, I am. I definitely want to be at this next tournament. All right, well, we should really get started building your team then. Why don't you take a look through your bag and see what some of the Pokemon that you have are that, you know, are on the top meta list for this cup. Oh, dude, check it out. Like, I see that Venusaur is a good pick for this cup. Should I use that one? Well, does it have Frenzy Plant? Let's see. No, it doesn't have Frenzy Plant. Oof, that's a tough one. That's a tough one, man. Why is that? What's the problem with that? Well, Frenzy Plant is Venusaur's best move by far. I mean, if you don't have it, then you might not even want to consider running that. You know, I want to give you a good chance in this upcoming tournament. Oh, okay, that's kind of so how do I get the move then? Can I just TM it? No, you can't TM it. I'm sorry to say. What? So wait a minute. If I can't use a TM, then how do I get these moves? Well, you see, the only way that you were able to get these moves is by playing on a specific day, on a specific weekend, during a specific 3-hour period, and after that, it has been completely unavailable ever since. Wow, that sucks. So, will there ever be another sort of event where we can get these kind of moves? Well, we really don't know. I mean, the last time we had an event like that was in December. You mean I have to wait all the way until December in order for the chance to possibly get the move I want so I could be competitive? Well, yeah. Well, alright then. Let's see what else I got. Let's see. Ooh, I've got a Hypno that would be great for this league. Well, does it have Shadow Ball? Let's see. Nope, no Shadow Ball. Is that a move I could still get? No. So how was I supposed to get this move? Did this one have like a 3-hour weekend window thing too, or how did that work? Well, what happened is the move was basically put into the game, and Niantic completely removed it randomly one day without telling anybody. I guess I can't use my Hypno either. What else do I have? Shoot. What about Charizard? He seems like he's a top pick for this cup. Do you have Blast Burn Charizard? No, I don't have Blast Burn Charizard. Do you have Wing Attack on your Charizard? No, I don't have Wing Attack on the Charizard. Well, you kind of need either one of those two moves with Charizard. Otherwise, you know, Charizard is squishy. He's not that great in a lot of situations, you know, if he doesn't have those moves. So how am I supposed to get both Wing Attack and Blast Burn? Well, you can't. In fact, it's actually never even been possible to get these two moves together. What? Well, you see, because one of the moves is a legacy move. It was one of those moves that was just randomly removed from the game for no reason, and then Blast Burn is actually a Community Day move that also has a specific 3-hour window time frame that you need to evolve it on in order to get it. So, since one of them is a legacy move, and the other is a Community Day move, and the legacy move disappeared before the Community Day, what that means is that it's technically impossible to have both of these moves on the Pokemon at the same time. Wow, this is starting to get really disappointing. Man, oh man, do I have anything that'll potentially work? I mean, you could use something like, you know, like if we're talking about the grass types, you could probably use something like a Victory Bell or something like that, but they really aren't the top meta picks. It's going to be a lot more challenging for you to try and win with these teams. So what you're telling me is that there's this whole list of moves that I simply have no way whatsoever to get anymore. Yeah, yeah, I'm sorry, man. Well, from the way it sounds, it seems like every one of the top Pokemon, Venomoth. What about Venomoth? Like, how about him? Is he good for the cup? Well, does he have Bug Bite? No. Let me guess. That's a legacy move too. Yep. Okay, well, we'll keep looking. I gotta tell you, man, like this, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to do this. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to compete. You know, I like all these Pokemon, they seem like they need their moves, and I just don't have any of them. Well, I don't know what to say, man. That's just how it is. I wish I could help. I wish I could give you like more advice on what we could do. Dude, I was really excited about this, but like I've been working a lot. I've been putting in lots and lots of long weekends. Like, I just haven't had the time to grind all these years. This is really starting to seem like something that like only caters to the players who have been playing this game the longest. You know what I mean? Yeah, I know what you mean. I should probably make a YouTube video about it at some point. But I'm sure you got something on your team that you could probably use, I mean, dude, don't, no, I'm out. I'm out. I'm done with this. Like this, you're telling me right now that because these moves are inaccessible, because I haven't kept up with the game like most other players, that I'm basically punished by having no way to be on the same competitive level as any of them. I I don't know what to tell you, dude. Like, dude, just don't even worry about it. Like, I'm just glad that you found something that you enjoy. I think this is going to be the kind of thing where this is. I'll just leave you to do it, man. Like, I'll be rooting for you. I'll be right there with you, rooting for you in all those tournaments. No, man, don't give up. Like, I don't want you to give up, man. Like, that's it's just a little technicality. It's that you could we might be able to win with you know, some off meta picks, maybe. Like, I mean, it's going to take lots and lots and lots of practice. You know, it's going to take a lot and a lot of understanding of the deeper mechanics of the game, but you know, you could probably do it. Dude, good luck at your tournament, man. Like, it's good to see you again. Peace. So as you can tell from that little story I told you about, then this is a real conversation that I had with one of my friends. It went almost exactly like this. As you can tell from that conversation, it's really, really discouraging right off the bat, you know? I mean, before they even get started. Think about this. One of the reasons for the success of the Game Boy games is because there were so many Pokemon. There were so many to choose from. There were so many moves. And you could build your team however you wanted to. There was no moves that were excluded because of a time difference, because of like a limited time release. There was nothing that stood in your way from being able to create the team that you really wanted. And the thing is, not only is this discouraging to new players, but it completely flies in the face of what an esports game should be. You see, every esports game that has a huge crowd, you can look through all of the popular ones, and I can almost guarantee you with a 99.999% accuracy that every single one of these games that you see on big tournament circuits are there because all the same opportunities exist for all players. No one part of any game is excluded for anybody. Every single person has the same set of tools and the same chances to win. The only thing that should determine whether or not a player wins or loses is their skill level and their strategy. There should be nothing else that determines the winner. Unfortunately, that's exactly what we have in Pokemon Go right now. We have situations in Pokemon Go right now where one or two legacy moves can win you or lose you the battle. Case in point, Valor-Ash using the Wing Attack Charizard. He was able to create a new strategy and come up with something different and come up with new strats because he had access to a specific move. And that's what happens when you have access to more moves. You can create more strategies. You can create more ways to win. You can throw your opponents off their game. You can have more surprises. You will have to think harder, and you'd have to stay on your toes a little bit, you know, more. So one of the benefits of re-adding all the legacy moves right off the bat is that players are going to be able to come up with a lot more strategies and a lot more ways to win, and they're going to be challenging each other and challenging players in new ways. I only see this as a good thing. But one thing you guys haven't thought about is how many one thing I bet you guys haven't thought about is how many other ways re-adding legacy moves into the game could not only help players, but help Niantic, help the tournament scene. It would be good for literally everybody. The only people it's actually not going to be good for are the ones who want to keep these Pokemon with these rare moves in their collection as a means to show off to other players, to say, hey, guess what? I got something you don't. So, but I feel like that's really the only subset of people who are really going to be upset. Now, in terms of collectors, think of how much it would help collectors to just be able to remove legacy moves from the game. I mean, yes, those Pokemon wouldn't be rare or valuable anymore, but at the same time, that has happened with a lot of Pokemon. It took me over a year to get my first Snorlax. I can remember I was trying to hatch eggs and trying to hatch eggs. I was trying to find one in the wild, right? There was one night where I was like in my bed. It was like 5:30 in the morning or something. Like I had stayed up really late that night. And I opened up my phone and here it was. There was the shadow of the Snorlax on my nearby radar. There it was. And I was finally going to go get it, right? So I threw all my clothes on. I threw my slippers on. I started walking around the neighborhood at like almost 5 o'clock in the morning. Sun was starting to come up. I go down, up and down 3 roads, walking up and down them on the cul-de-sacs, you know, and stuff that are around here. And, you know, I finally find it. After like 20 minutes of looking, I finally find that Snorlax. And you know what I do? I throw an Ultra Ball and I throw a Raspberry and it runs away on the very first throw. You have no idea how much that made me mad. And, you know, I didn't even get a Snorlax until they actually started doing them in raids, you know? Nowadays, you know, they've had Snorlax in field researches. They've had this Yawn event where the Snorlaxes were spawning in the wild with Yawn and everything. So, I mean, we've had events now where they're just spawning left, right, and center. I mean, no longer is Snorlax a special thing. Here's another story I have for you about devalued Pokemon, okay? So I spent probably even longer, probably over 2 years trying to find a Hitmonlee. I was trying to get the right Tyrogue. I couldn't hatch the right Tyrogue with the right IVs. I had never seen a Hitmonlee in the wild. And it just so happened that one of my friends in the area in Pokemon Go sent me a text message, and he's like, hey, I'm over at Taco Bell here. There's the Hitmonlee. I left my house as soon as I got that message, and that was when I got my first Hitmonlee. And man, it felt so good to finally get that, because that's what completed my Pokedex, right? Of course, then we have fighting events where, you know, Hitmonlee spawns, you know, 5, 6, 7 of them on a single street, and no longer does it feel special. And here's the point of these stories. Am I going to be butthurt about it? Am I really going to be like, yeah, like I'm permanently mad at Niantic because they ruined something that I thought was rare in my collection? No, of course not. I mean, it's a mobile game. They have to keep rolling out content. They have to keep creating new stuff, bringing things back. That's just how mobile games work. That's just how any game works that is intended to have a life cycle that lasts longer than just the release that was put on the disc or the cartridge. So now that I've gotten really sidetracked with that little story, I'll try to get back on track here and talk about how this could really help collectors. If all of the legacy moves were reintroduced to the game, then people would not have to worry about holding on to extra Pokemon just because of their legacy moves. They could TM those moves away at any time they wanted to without having to worry. And then they could TM those moves back in the future when they needed them. This would allow people to get rid of a lot of Pokemon from their bag space and open up more slots for them to be able to catch more Pokemon. Because as you guys know, bag space is absolutely invaluable in this game. Bag space is the second most valuable resource next to Stardust. And I'm talking about Pokemon storage. I know bag space is a different thing, but think about this. If they could just TM those moves, they could get rid of those Pokemon, and then they wouldn't have to spend so much time. You know, they could spend less time micromanaging their collection. Then they could just throw all these things away, and they could free up more space for them to go on more walks, throw more Pokeballs, have to restock and hit more Pokestops. And if they're frequent players and they're using a Go Plus or something like that, then they might actually be in the position where they have to buy more Pokeballs with real world money, which is, you know, what Niantic is trying to do with this game. They're trying to make this the money, right? So right there, that's already the second way this is going to help players. Number one, in terms of collectors, and number two, in terms of bringing new people in that are really interested in this game, that want to stay interested in this game. Now, I'll move on to my third point of how this could help. I don't know if you guys know this, but one of the only ways that a lot of people can get Pokemon with legacy moves these days, especially if they don't have many big players in their community that have collected a lot of these, is unfortunately through eBay. And the kind of numbers and the kind of prices that I see for some of these Pokemon that are for sale on eBay, which, by the way, is against the terms of service, you know, are absolutely ridiculous. It's just absolutely exploitative to people. I mean, nobody should ever be in the position where they feel like they have to go to scalpers and spoofers who are providing these things for people just so they can have a competitive edge. But if legacy moves were reintroduced, all those sales, every single one of those black market Pokemon sales would vanish overnight. They would be gone. This would no longer be a problem. There would be far fewer people who are going to spoofers and breaking terms of service to get these things. Because there would be no need anymore. There would be no need to go to these people and pay like ridiculously exorbitant amounts of money for some of these Pokemon just to get a move. There are some people who are going to be competing in these tournaments that have been given these Pokemon by spoofers. And the thing is, there's really no way to know when you're battling somebody if they have a legitimate Pokemon or if they have something that somebody just gave to them in a spoof because they bought it on eBay. So the next time you're at a tournament, you got to think that a lot of these people might have Pokemon that are, you know, illegal or obtained in a way that was against the terms of service. But like I said, you make all the legacy moves available and all that stuff disappears instantly. And I feel that if this scene is going to grow, if this is going to be an eSport, if this is going to be something that's in the eyes of the public, then it can't really be common knowledge to everybody that everybody's going out and buying legacy Pokemon on eBay just to be competitive. Because right now the tournament scene is kind of at a point where it's getting to be more popular, but there isn't really like huge grand prizes. There isn't really like $100,000 checks or anything. But when you have players that are willing to do whatever it takes to win, and they say, oh, like, I'll pay $1,000 for a Legacy Blaziken. If it means I have the potential to win that 100 grand, then I will absolutely do it. If this game gets elevated to a more competitive esports level, then that's going to get to be a bigger and bigger and bigger problem, which is why re-adding Legacy moves, all of them, would solve that problem in an instant. So that was point number 3. Let's get into point number 4. Now, we want to bring more people into this game, right? Niantic is always looking for ways to bring in players who have quit the game and, you know, are trying to bring them back in with more, you know, exclusive things or events or whatever you have you, right? Think about this. There's only a finite number of legacy moves in existence. There's only so many that exist. Like, the number of Shadow Ball Hypnos is not going to go up. It's only going to go down. And eventually what's going to happen with a lot of these legacy Pokemon is that people are going to trade them away one by one to other PvPers, and it'll eventually get to the point where people only have one of each of these legacy Pokemon, and then once it hits that point, there's no longer any way for people to get these Pokemon even in trades, because once a Pokemon is traded to you, it cannot be traded away to somebody else. So like, let's say you got a Frenzy Plant Venusaur and you're not using it, so you think, and you're going on vacation, so you're not going to, you know, come to the tournament, so you decide you can give it to your friend. Maybe he can use it. Oh wait, that's right, you can't, because you can only trade one Pokemon at a time, right? And here's the thing. Right now, we're at this point in the tournament scene where it's not too much of a problem yet. We don't have that many players to the point where these moves are completely inaccessible. But if we want to take this to an esports level, and we want to take this to where it's more mainstream, then those number of moves are going to keep going down and down and down and down and down. The number of moves that exist in the world. And eventually it's going to get to the point where new players simply have no ability whatsoever to keep up with the top people who have been playing this game for 3 years or longer. And now some of you might think, well, they earned that right. But they earned these legacy moves. They get the chance to keep them and have the exclusive advantage over everybody else. But again, that flies directly in the face of what a competitive esports game is. If at any moment you do not have a level playing field between all players, then you don't have a balanced game. You have a game where some people are given a special advantage just because of something they managed to not throw away or whatever. And eventually it's going to get to the point where there's very, very, very few people in the world with these moves. It's going to get to a choke point. It's going to get to a point where, like, legacy moves are so hard to obtain that if you're new to the scene, you might as well not even try. But if we reintroduce legacy moves, we can keep new players competitive with the older players. We can have a scene where true skill and strategy are the only things that let you win. That's how every good competitive game should be. I'm going to talk about another game, for example, that I really, really love, and I'm going to try to show some footage of it. I love competitive Quake 3. I still watch it to this day. I love watching Cooler and CZM and Dahang and all these like great players that have come out. And these matches, I love Quake so much because this game is so intense. Like, you have to be 100% focused at all times. You have to know where everything is. You have to have an incredible amount of skill before you can even begin to compete. And, you know, like, the reason these matches are so exciting to the audience is because they know that the reason that one person is beating another is not because they have access to a special legacy weapon that they could have only gotten during a 3-hour time period during a specific weekend, but it's because they have the skill to win. It's because they are simply better players. They don't have any advantage over their opponents, right? And that is what makes matches exciting. That's what makes matches thrilling to watch. Who likes to watch a football game where the other team is like crushing their opponents like 57-0? Most of the time sports networks, they'll just cut off games like that because they know everybody's leaving, nobody's watching. But when you have two teams that are extremely good and they're playing a really competitive game and they're staying very close, those are the kind of things that are exciting. Those are the kind of things that draw people in and make them be like, man, I want to be part of this. Did you see that move? Did you see that strategy? Man, that was dope. But when you have legacy moves, it's like, oh, he's winning because he has an advantage that the opponent cannot possibly obtain in any way. Oh, it's like watching a bully go and beat up an old man in a wheelchair. It's just not fun to watch, you know? I mean, it's not even right, you know? And I know what a lot of you guys are probably thinking right now is, well, you should be able to win without legacy moves. You should be able to win, you know, without that. Really? I mean, let's be real here. Like with my story I told, who's going to use a Venusaur without Frenzy Plant? Who's going to use an Executor without Confusion? Who's going to use a Hypno without Shadow Ball? Why would you even want to use those Pokemon if they didn't have them? It's just really limiting. Another thing I'd want to mention is with the Legacy moves. How many of them belong to the most popular Pokemon? The starters are some of the most popular Pokemon in the entire franchise, yet they are some of the most dependent on their legacy moves. So, like, if you miss the community day, then, and if you love Venusaur, if you love Bulbasaur, if you love Blastoise, if you love Sceptile or whatever, it's too bad. I mean, you can use them, but, you know, you're going to go into battle knowing that you're at a disadvantage. Another thing I wanted to point out, too, really quick about this change is that I don't really see this as a really difficult change for Niantic to pull off. I mean, all the moves are still coded in the game. There's probably just a flag on every single one of them, or like some kind of variable that tells the program whether or not the move is a legacy move. I mean, re-adding legacy moves would not be hard for Niantic. As somebody who has been programming computers like most of my life, I think this would be a very, very easy thing for them to do. All they would have to do is take that 1 and flip it to a 0 for some of these moves, and that's it. They wouldn't have to add any extra graphical assets. They wouldn't have to add any new huge parts of the game. I feel like the whole reason that, you know, I want to request this, the whole reason that I'm getting so passionate about it to begin with, is because I feel like it's such an easy change for them to implement. And if they would just flip them 1s to 0s, then they would be showing the PvP community just through that one tiny little gesture how much they care. One of the sentiments I hear from a lot of players is that, oh, well, if they made moves, if they just released the move instead of having it be a limited time thing, then nobody would play on Community Day. Nobody would play. There'd be no reason. Nobody would go out. Really? Really? You really think that nobody would go out? Okay, I can give you guys a list of reasons why you would still go out on Community. Candy bonuses, Stardust bonuses, half and quarter egg distance. That's all fantastic. A lot of the times when you go out on Community Day, they're spawning an extremely rare Pokemon that's very, very hard to get candy for normally. So you still have the opportunity to rack up tons and tons of candy. Community days, I still see a lot of people going out and playing with each other and interacting with each other. And that's kind of the whole point of community days to begin with. Do you guys really think that having the legacy move be like the shiny, where it's just released and available in the game afterwards, do you really think that would kill people's motivation to play on Community Day? I don't think so. I think it's pretty much become an institution at this point as far as Pokemon Go is concerned. I mean, I don't think you're going to get people stopping, you know, coming out to Community Days. I really don't. I mean, post in the comments, post down below if you really think that having the legacy moves and the Community Day moves just being available from the time of the Community Day, tell me why you think that would ruin Community Days. So if you guys have any ideas on why this would be a big problem, if you disagree with anything I've said, if you think that I'm way off base, if you think I'm being like totally psycho about this, you know, post a comment down in the thing, because I don't want to see this game die due to neglect, because I think that would be a huge, huge waste of all the love and time and attention and resources that this community has dedicated to this game. And I don't want to see the whole thing ruined because Niantic just wants to be selfish about legacy moves. I really, really don't. And I don't know, like I said, I started this whole video because I wanted to inspire a bigger discussion. The final thing that I really wanted to address one last time is the kind of defeatist attitude that I see around this sort of thing. And I really don't understand why that attitude exists in the community. We wanted more Mewtwo EX raid passes per raid. We demanded them over and over and over to Niantic, and we got them, right? You know, we didn't have PvP or trading for the longest time, but we begged them and begged them and begged them, and the community pushed them and pushed them and pushed them. And they did it. They responded, you know? They realized they've done more things, like as far as littler events too, smaller events where they've released certain legacy Pokemon and stuff again. I mean, I guess they're trying to release more legacy Pokemon. You know, they did the whole Lapras thing, but they flat out just need to do every single move across the board, like right now. And the thing is, if we can convince Niantic to finally get off their butts and make PvP and make trading, then why is it so impossible to consider that the same couldn't be done for legacy moves? Especially since I just explained to you guys that all it would take is just flipping them ones to zeros. That's it. That's literally all it would take. So, guys, don't give up. I mean, and think about this. Think about everything I said. Really give it some thought and ask yourself, you know, should we be demanding this? Should we be doing this? Because, like, if we want a future for this game, I think legacy moves absolutely need to be re-added. And I just think it's not something that a lot of people in the community have given much thought to, and hopefully I can give you guys a little kick in the pants maybe to you know, get some more things done, and you know, maybe we can change this for the better, and we can make this game better than it ever has been before. So I hope you guys enjoyed that whole rant. I tried to preserve as much of it as possible. You know, I tried to, you know, do some things that, you know, I didn't talk about legacy moves the entire time during that rant, and honestly, there's still a whole lot more I could say about legacy moves. You know, one of the things I thought of after that was, you know, with Pokemon having a more diverse move set, you know, and how much more fun that is, rather than having Pokemon that are just limited to like 1 or 2 or 3 good moves. You know, like think about another good example is Quagsire. In this last cup, every single one of his charge moves was useful. Every single one was good. Acid Spray, Sludge Bomb, Stone Edge, and Earthquake were all very, very good. And I found when I was in the last Rainbow Cup tournament that I was having a lot of fun fighting against people's Quagsires, because it was a really nice, interesting challenge to be able to guess what their Quagsire had, you know, in the moment. You know, they're not going to tell you before the battle, but then to go into the next battle and be able to formulate strategies around that, I think added a whole new dynamic, especially to the 2 out of 3 format, you know, that most of these matches are played in. So that's just another idea, and I'm still going on about this. There's still probably more issues with legacy moves that I haven't even thought of. But one thing I wanted to do for you guys is, you know, you're probably, you know, looking at me and going like, well, that's just your opinion. That's your opinion, Cade. Like, that's like your, you know, that's just you speaking. That's only you. Well, I thought instead of just taking my word for it, that I would try to get the word from somebody in this industry, and somebody in the esports industry who really knows what he's doing. And I thought, what better person to ask about fairness and competitive balance than the very person at the very tippy top of the esports chain, the president of MLG. Yes, you heard me correctly. The president of MLG, Mike Sepso, the man, the boss, the guy at the very top of the pyramid, the guy who oversees everything that goes on with MLG. I figured, why don't we ask him what his opinion is on this? And while I didn't actually do that, you know, I built you up, but of course I didn't get, you know, the ability to ask Mike Sepso in person about any of this. It only took me a couple moments really to just a couple of Google searches just for some keywords on like MLG and competitive play and balance and fairness and stuff like that. And this was one of the first things that actually popped up on my screen, which was this article, Making Competitive Gaming Fair. MLG's president talks about creating a balance. Like, if I was looking for an article that touches on the very subject that I've just been talking about, this is it. Like, this, if we can't find out what we need to know here, then there's probably no place that we are going to find out about it. So why don't I read this article to you, because I don't know how big this text is going to show up on the screen, but I'm going to go over this article, kind of, skim it really quickly and just see what he has to say about balance and fairness and how that may apply to Pokemon Go and especially legacy moves in the future. So the article reads, the last time Digital Trends spoke with Major League Gaming co-founder and president Mike Sepso, he said he wants MLG to be one of the top 5 sports in the US. But there's a contradiction at work here. In another recent chat, Sepso said that he eventually wants the league to be more ESPN and less NFL, which is something, again, we were talking about with getting it seen on big television networks. In other words, he wants MLG to broadcast, curate, host, and comment on games, but have less day-to-day influence over the specifics of how they're played. A less direct influence, anyway. There is still the question of how to ensure that the titles used for professional gaming are balanced for competition. See, there's that word again, balanced, and he's already, in this first part of the article, he's already hinting at how he can have slightly more hands-off approach and really trust in the developers to take this game to the competitive level that it needs to go to. As it stands, the league is working with developers like Treyarch on its Call of Duty games, Sony Online Entertainment on PlanetSide 2, and Warner Bros. Interactive on Infinite Crisis to make sure those games are in tip-top eSports shape by the time they launch. Well, clearly that was not Pokemon Go, so anyways. But we need look no further than League of Legends, by far the biggest draw at last month's MLG 2013 Spring Championship, to see where Sepso wants MLG's relationship with League games to eventually go, while developer Riot Games occasionally accepts MLG's feedback. Really, we don't have to do much of anything with that game to get it esports ready, Sepso said. This game is built for esports. So, I mean, obviously League of Legends knows what they're doing. I'm just going to skim these because I think this paragraph and the next one mostly talk about League of Legends and their relationship with MLG. But this next paragraph is where things get pretty relevant to what we're talking about. The next one reads, this is an important change for the MLG. In the past, the league would spend huge amount of time and effort whittling away weapons, maps, and game types that aren't conducive to balanced competitive play in various games. For example, the beloved Halo Combat Evolved was a particularly egregious offender. We spent most of our time banning weapons and maps in that game, which is not really what we want to do, Sepso recalled, laughing. You know, we'd rather be playing the game as it comes out of the box. And as more of the league's development and publishing partners realize that MLG's core audience is important, those partners are making sure their games provide what competitive players want from the get-go. So right away, Mike Sepso is, when he's talking about these competitive games, he's not just talking about things that are unavailable for certain players in this. He's basically talking about nerfing maps and weapons which are already available to all players across the board in any normal game. Like when you go in to play a game of Halo with your friends and everybody spawns in on the map, everybody has an equal chance to get various items and to have a winning strategy, depending on where they spawn and other things like that. But nothing's limited to any part of the game. So let me ask you this. If we were to go to Mike Sepso and we were to say, hey, there's all these Pokemon that only certain specific people in the world have, and there's, you know, a lot of people aren't going to be even able to get these particular moves on these Pokemon, what do you think he's going to think about that? Do you think he's going to be like, oh, that's okay, we'll just allow all of that. We'll just allow this complete unbalance of the game to be here. That's fine. Like, Let me tell you guys, I don't think so. I think, when we look at something like this and we see that, hey, he's clearly like being very, very particular about what they want to nerf and what they want to keep, then, as far as it applies to this, then, we absolutely need to consider, reintroducing legacy moves or severely cutting back on the amount of legacy moves that are in the game. Currently, MLG employs rule teams that, along with communities of pro players, big point here, curate league games and cull out anything that doesn't work for competitive play. Some maps are too big, making them boring to watch. Others give one team an unfair advantage. Some weapons are just plain overpowered. Every map, weapon, and game mode in every league game is put through the ringer, and what comes out the other side is a lean esports machine. The overarching kind of high-level goal is to eliminate as much chance as possible, so that the game is really 100% skill. Like, you know what? I went on that whole rant about, the games being based on pure strategy and skill in order to be considered an esport, and I didn't even read this article before I went on this rant, and there it is. There it is, right there. Exactly, right from the mouth of the man himself. He explained, generally speaking, it's an easy consensus to get to. Now, one other thing that's huge about that article that I want to point out is this part about employing rule teams of pro players that curate games and cull out anything for competitive play. Don't we have that? We have the Sylph Road, which has been working and analyzing and testing things tirelessly in order to bring us a great variety of fun, various tournament cups and various rule sets that we can use, to keep this game fresh and keep this game interesting and keep players coming back, for more and, make it something that's constantly engaging. If it was just limited to just straight 1,500, 2,500 and unlimited, and there was really no limitations on anything else, then the meta would, get stale really, really quick, but with all the changes that Sylph Road has been implementing and all the new ideas that they've been experimenting with, they have the team. They have dozens of people who have put in like months, even years of hard work, to develop these things. So, as far as another point in Pokemon Go's favor, do they have the pro players to curate league games and call out anything that doesn't work for competitive play? Absolutely. Another huge check mark on the board for, or in that case, a tally mark on the board for Pokemon Go PvP. This next paragraph here just basically talks about Treyarch and Black Ops 2 and some of the things related to that, so that's not really totally relevant to this discussion. This next paragraph is pretty good, though. There's a balance to strike, though, and he recognizes that Call of Duty can't be 100% competition-oriented like LoL is. Obviously, they need to cater to a much larger audience, so they have to have lots of different kinds of game types and stuff, not just the MLG Pro stuff, but everything that anybody would like to play, Sepso said. So we have to be understanding of that balance too, right? We can't just expect Activision to shut out 90% of their audience and just do the pro stuff. Again, just what I was talking about. I didn't remember what this particular paragraph said, but again, having different kind of game types and stuff. Isn't that exactly what we're seeing with all of the Sylph Road Cups? Again, another tally mark in Pokemon Go's favor as far as whether or not this could be an esport. But MLG does everything in its power to make sure that the games its player base wants to play are ready for competition out of the box, and that MLG doesn't have to keep policing them after launch. That way they can focus on what the future holds. What we're trying to do is create a better kind of communication channel between our pro and amateur, a highly competitive MLG community and our developer partners, Sepso said. And it allows us now to focus more on audience growth and making everything bigger, being a little bit more ESPN and a little bit less NFL. So this last paragraph, I think that pretty much says the last thing that we need to say about this whole situation is that Niantic really needs to get involved. They really need to start listening to some of these concerns, and we need to be putting them out there. And not just me. Don't just look to me, you know, to put these ideas out there. Look at anything you think may be unbalanced. Look at things that you may think are holding it back from keeping new potential players coming back to the game. Like, really think about this and maybe put out your own videos. Challenge me, you know, like challenge my opinions. I encourage you. But right there it says that, and like I said, with Mewtwo raid passes, with trading, with PvP, all these things added into the game, you know, we demanded it and they responded. But they will not respond unless we, the community, demand it. And haven't we been discussing this entire video about how the community, with the amount of hard work and passion they have for these games, you know, couldn't make the change that's needed, where, you know, they could come in and MLG could just trust the Sylph Road community to develop fun and unique metas, and trust in Niantic at the same time to keep their game balanced and fair and eliminate a lot of weird issues with only certain people having certain things, you know, and that sort of thing. We can do it, guys. And if I haven't given you enough like fire and enough ammo and enough like inspiration to do this, like, I don't know what will. This is why I'm making this video so long. This is why I'm covering so many topics, because I want this to be my final end-all be-all word on this. I want this to be my contribution to how this could be a bigger competitive game. So as long as I'm trying to introduce as many ideas as I can into the discussion of how Pokemon Go PvP could be a bigger thing, there were really two more kind of topics and subjects and ideas that I kind of wanted to touch on. And one of those that I really wanted to mention real quick and not go into too much detail about was actually IVs. And our ability to just be able to see our IVs in a much easier way without having to go through the appraisal system. And perhaps there could be a complete overhaul in that aspect as far as just being able to just see them, which would save a lot of time for players. It would save players from having to use IV calculators and IV Calci, and, you know, just be able to save us a ton of time when it comes to sorting our space and everything else. And it's not so much something that I think holds PvP back necessarily, but it's just a quality of life update that I think could be touched on. And if you want to go check out my thoughts on that, the link is, the picture's here, but the link is going to be in the description. So if you want to see my thoughts on that, just go and click on that link and go down in the comments section. I should have a link in the comments that says skip to the point, and you can check out what my thoughts are on PvP IVs and just being able to see our IVs in general from there. The last idea I had that I wanted to put out there, something that's more of a really long-term goal, something that I guess is more of a pipe dream idea for me than anything else, and a pipe dream idea that I've had for this PvP community and for the eSport future of this game is, now hear me out, some kind of lightweight PC application that would be able to handle Pokemon Go PvP code and display it simply in the computer. And now you're probably thinking, well, explain yourself. What do you mean by something that just handles PvP code? Well, if we had an application that we could just put onto any computer, and all its job would be is to just basically do nothing but handle PvP related code. I mean, it's something that would interact with Pokemon Go, but not something that would be giving players any sort of other bonuses or anything in any sort of way. It's not something that I'm talking about that would like generate stardust or items or extra gifts or extra Pokemon spawns or rare spawns or anything like that. There would be nothing that this application would give back. Its sole purpose would be to just handle the code and present it in a way that is a lot more palatable for the audience. Now that seems like kind of a big ask, but I think there are a lot of reasons why something like this should be maybe start to be thought about, and something that should be starting, you know, fans should start to either, you know, try to develop or, you know, get in contact with Niantic to develop. Because while I may not have explained it too well just in my opening thing, I'm going to cover a lot of data points on how something like this could really help the PvP scene overall and give you kind of an idea of what I'm even talking about in the first place. So the first benefit to having an application on your PC that could handle something like this, that's just a kind of a lighter free application, maybe something that, you know, tournament organizers could get a hold of, is that we could actually use that application to present Pokemon Go PvP in a way that's much more palatable to the audience. We could take the battles, and instead of having two people's screens that you're both watching at the same time, where it's basically just the same Pokemon but switched on both players' screens, you could have Pokemon Go PvP presented to the audience in full 1080p format, and you could do a lot more in terms of the graphics and the presentation of the game. You could make the Pokemon look better. You could make the animations more fluid. You could add some backgrounds. You could add some exciting tournament backgrounds, maybe something akin to what we've seen in some of the Pokemon Stadium games, but like fleshed out and maybe a little bit better looking, a little bit more updated for the modern age, because we really haven't had, you know, much for stadium games since the first two for N64. And, you know, we could probably take some lessons from things like Pokken Tournament and other games of that nature in this aspect. Because when you think about the presentation of PvP as it is, it's really basic, isn't it? I don't mean that in an insulting way. I mean that in just, it's just a plain green field with a circle in it, and I understand that, you know, for gameplay purposes and loading purposes, Niantic probably wants to keep the graphical load on PvP lightweight so that there's less lag. I mean, we already know that there's plenty of lag in PvP as it is, but hear me out on this. But if that was handled by the computer instead, then the PC could do all the heavy lifting of all the graphical processing, and the only thing it would really be taking in is information about each player's team and each player's actions as far as what they decide to do in battle. The second benefit to having a program like this would be to basically improve the overall connection between players. Because let's face it, a lot of us have watched certain tournaments, like I think it was the regional championships or maybe even the world championships. But try as they might, the broadcasters, the announcers, Zionic, King IV, Nick, they were doing their best to really deal with the situation, but there were a lot of lag issues, either relying on data connections being spotty in certain areas, or the Wi-Fi just generally being bad and overused in that section of the bar or wherever they were at that night. But if we had a lightweight application on the PC that would handle a lot of this code and everything, and if we had some way to connect our phones to the PC instead of having to send PvP code to the satellites and go through data and go through the Wi-Fi and go through all of that, we could have all of that just be handled by the computer. And now I know what you're thinking. This is probably the most unrealistic situation. Like, Niantic, how is Niantic going to allow this? How are they going to allow phones to just directly communicate with the computer and be able to transmit PvP code. Well, that's why I only wanted this lightweight application or whatever it is to be able to just read PvP code and not be able to put anything back out into the game. And of course, this would require some sort of update and some sort of support from Niantic. It would require some sort of APK update that might enable Pokemon to connect to the computer via Bluetooth. That might be a good option, and I think that could be a lot faster and a lot more effective option than going through the Wi-Fi. Or perhaps, maybe, just maybe, it's finally time. It's finally time, guys. Maybe, just maybe, we need to bring back the link cable. Just be able to have our phones be able to be plugged in to the computer via USB and just be able to transmit basic information about PvP code that way. Nothing else, just those things. And if they were to allow that, then there would be so much less lag. I mean, come on, how embarrassing would it be if you were on a big main stage at Evo or something and you had to keep restarting the games because it just kept lagging out? Like, you don't want that. That's not a good look, especially after everything that happened with the first year's Go Fest and the fact that the media hasn't really caught on to the fact that the last two Go Fests were actually really good. It's just that, you know, the media likes so much negative attention. They like to give a lot of negative press and find things and pick apart things wherever they can. So, you know, I really don't think that Niantic, you know, if they were to take this to an esports level, can really afford to be seen as, you know, a company that it can't afford to be seen as a game where PvP is so laggy. You know what I mean? I mean, players could still, you know, battle as normal on their phones between each other when they're not, you know, at these tournaments. But when it comes to that competitive tournament scene, it would be really nice to be able to ensure that there is no lag of any kind. And that was really the whole main purpose. And even though it's the second point of my argument, it's the main purpose behind why I even conceived of this idea in the first place. So I kind of mashed a whole bunch of points I wanted to make into the first two bullet points that I covered, but the last big point that I wanted to cover about this, especially for tournament play, is the ability of a program like this to be able to present the game in a way that creates more hype for the audience. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, I mean, it's one of the strategies in Pokemon Go PvP is whether or not you're going to shield that charge move, whether or not that opponent has a certain charge move, whether or not they're going to throw a specific thing at you. Are you going to shield? Are you going to tank it? What are you going to do? Like, what strategies are you going to use against that Pokemon when he throws that charge move? Now, the thing is, from the player's perspective, from the receiving end of the charge move, the whole point is that you don't know what they're going to throw at you. That's why they even added 2 charge moves into the game in the first place, to create more strategy in that aspect. But the thing is that if you have 2 players' phones displayed on a big screen at the same time, then what's going to happen is one of the player's screens is going to show the charge move to the audience before it actually hits. Now, the thing about this is that, yeah, this could be, you know, something that the audience could get into and everything, but at the same time, it kind of creates a problem when you think about it when it comes to competitive play. Because when the audience sees that a certain charge move is coming up, there's going to be varying levels of hype based around what that charge move is going to be. Like a brick break is, you know, it's a very low damaging move. If it hits for super effective damage, it can do something, but it's really not the most devastating move there is. Now, if the opponent is going for a hyper beam, on the other hand, like a super clutch hyper beam or something, that could be a huge hype moment for the crowd, you know? I mean, it could be something where, you know, when they finally see that that's going to be the charge move, it shows up, blah, 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 used hyper beam, and the audience, oh, and they realize the other guy didn't block, you know, and it would create such a hype moment. And obviously that's an extreme example, but if you have the audience reacting to the charge moves, if they can see both phones and both charge moves going on at the same time, no matter who casts them, then the audience is going to react in certain ways. They're going to react with various levels of hype. And I don't really think we want to put our competitors in soundproof booths, do we? Because that's not really the point of Pokemon Go to begin with. It's to get out and interact with people and all of those sorts of things, right? And on top of that, putting Pokemon Go players in a soundproof booth in order to protect them from any other information that might be incoming from the audience or any other outside source, you know, if they were to do that, that would just probably dampen their Wi-Fi signal or their data connection even more, which would create even more lag in matches. And I think just the ability to have like a single 1080p presentation where you've got just two Pokemon on a wide screen and you can see that one of them's building up a charge move. That charge move is always hidden from the audience, and you know, you'll be able to see whether the opponent shields or not. You know, I think that could be the best overall way to present these matches to the public and create the most hype within the matches, within each battle. I mean, it would take the audience by surprise, and we could have more overall excitement with each battle that happens. And just as I go to finish up the video, I remember finally the last point that I was going to make, and I'll probably remember more points about this and more benefits of a program like this as time goes on that I eventually forgot. But think of how much easier it would be to live stream Pokemon Go PvP if there was a lightweight application on the PC that just handled all of these things, you know, instead of the phones being able to have to handle everything, and Niantic servers having to handle everything. You could just have the application open on your desktop in its own window and just easily put that window into an open broadcaster or other type program, and there you go. It would be so easy. The thing is that I've seen a lot of PvP tournaments where they've had a lot of problems connecting players to a screen which can actually be presented to people. You know what I mean? Like, either they're trying to show both phones and they're trying to put mirror programs on both phones, or they're trying to have competitors log out of their phones and log into other people's phones, which seems like something that Niantic kind of doesn't want you to do. I mean, like, you know, I mean, logging in to, you know, on other people's accounts, it's always like a sketchy business anyway. I mean, a lot of people are using Google accounts, you know, and other things that are connected to other existing accounts that they have. And when you're having players having to log into each other's phones, it's just, you know, it's just, I wouldn't want anyone like changing around all my logins on my phone unless these guys had like a specific phone that was used for nothing more than just people logging into it for PvP. I just think that, you know, having a program like this would solve a lot of that. It would solve the whole problem of, you know, all these technicalities. Imagine just being able to show up to a tournament. There's a computer there. It's set up for live streaming. It's already going. Each competitor, all they have to do is come in, plug their phones in via USB, or maybe connect via Bluetooth. That's another option. And they're good to go. And they pick their teams and they say, say, you know, the battle's waiting to start, and then their Pokemon load onto the app and the battle begins, and it would be so much easier to live stream something like this, not to mention being able to put the video out to projectors in some kind of big venue, or even in a smaller venue, even say like, you know, at an anime convention. You know, I mean, if they had something like this, anime conventions would have so much of an easier time, and the setup times and the times between players setting up for the matches would be so much shorter. They would be so much faster and so much more efficient. I mean, just having so much downtime between matches because of technicalities between phones and accounts and connections. It's just, I feel like that will be something that could possibly hold PvP back in the future, and one of the reasons why I think, you know, at some point, maybe not right now, I mean, this is, like I said, this is a pipe dream idea, but at some point, we really should consider, like, and Niantic especially should consider putting out some kind of application like this. I think that it would be just overall much smarter if we were going for the whole idea of this being a big PvP game. So guys, I think that's it for the majority of my points for this video. If you have listened this far, then you obviously have a great deal of care for the future of PvP in this game. And I just want to thank you so much for sticking with me and listening to all my points. I feel like I can finally breathe. I got all of my points out that I wanted to make, and I kind of aired all my grievances and shared a lot of my ideas, and even some of my, you know, wackier, more out there ideas, which honestly I don't think that whole lightweight application that handles PvP is that wacky. I think that's something that would really benefit people. But, you know, I just wanted to end this video because I always try to do a little bit more of a sentimental ending, and I just went up to Canada, right? I just went up there for a vacation, and it was a great time and everything, but there was one thing I saw when I was coming back from Canada that really kind of sparked my interest and kind of made me realize that this is something that I need to make. This is a video that I had to put out there, and it took a long time to make this video, trust me, but it's something I needed to do because we actually stopped out at a landmark site which was a marker for where the time zones change. And this marker, this landmark, was full of various plaques and various information on how time zones came to be a thing. I mean, think about this, guys. Like, almost every single one of you who's watching this video, you've lived your whole life with time zones. You know, that's always been a thing that's been in your life. Unless you're over 100 years old at this point, you know, you've been using time zones in your everyday life. Not maybe every day, but, you know, in other times when you're trying to figure out when things come on, when people stream, whatever, etc. Whatever you use time for, basically. And if you talk to anybody who's around the world. And one thing that struck me as incredibly interesting when I was reading all of these plaques was the fact that this entire idea of time zones came from one guy, one man who had a vision to change something for the better, to have something that could help bring a little bit more, you know, order and stability and balance to things, you know, if we're comparing it to this topic. And I'm not saying like I'm that one man, like I'm this one great visionary. I'm not trying to like claim all kinds of credit or anything like that. That's not who I am, right? But I'm just saying that sometimes all it needs is that idea. All it needs is that spark. All it needs is that little bit of all it needs is that little bit of inspiration. And it can come from one person. It can come from 2 people. It can come from 5 people. It's as long as there's an idea. Like Facebook was one person's idea, right? I mean, he took another idea and just kind of, you know, adapted it to something, but it was just one person's idea. And look at Facebook now. I mean, Google was initially one person's idea, and it grew into a small team that had a vision. And that's what we have in the Pokemon Go PvP community. We have that vision. We have the people at the Sylph Road, all the great people on YouTube, so many of which I can't even list them all right now. And, you know, everybody creating great content, all the battlers, all the people contributing things, organizing tournaments, whether it's in real life or on Reddit or on Discord, I should say, and all these various things. Like, if there's an idea out there, if there's a will, there will be a way. That's the way I see it. And I just wanted to put this out there because, like, if I in any way can spark those ideas for bigger change, like, I mean, like, forget Mewtwo raid passes and adding PvP and trading and all that stuff I talked about. I mean, we're talking time zones here, like a human concept. He invented a human concept, which is not even a physical thing. It's just an idea in space-time, and we all use it now. It blows my mind. And when I saw this, you know, I've realized I had to make this. And, you know, I'm not the one idea that the community needs. I'm not the one brain and the one, you know, kind of person that is going to take everything, you know. I'm not saying that. Like, I feel like it's up to you guys now. I feel like it's up to the community to maybe think about these ideas and consider some of these things and run with them and try to make this game better than it ever has been before. So I'll leave you guys with that. I just want to thanks again for listening to my rant and my traditional long goodbye that I put at the end of every video. May you have great luck in your battles and in your tournaments. May you crush all your competition, and may the fire be lit under the community to push for the ultimate change, to make this game into one of the greatest esports, maybe not the greatest esport, but one of the best esports that this whole esport scene has ever seen. So once again, take care, you guys. I love you all. Good luck out there. Peace.